The Private Label Pod with your host Paul Mooney, brought to you by Private Label People.
You just listen and leave the rest up to us.
The world we live in is changing and changing fast. As private label people and business people, we have to adapt and change with it. Some of these will be small changes and some will be larger. For these, we may need to convince others that we are changing in the right direction. We may need to pitch them. Today we sat down with Robert Rickey to talk about the benefits and potential that can be born from pitching.
Get involved, have your say, ask us a question or leave us a voice message by heading on over to privatelabelpeople.com/podcast.
Have you ever pitched an idea to anybody?
Have you ever pitched an idea? I pitch ideas pretty much every single day of my life. And the first person that I pitch an idea to is me. Somebody once, I think it was actually ESO, referred to the shower or the shower room as the neurotic spaceship. I sort of call it like an innovation center, but it's one of the things we all do most of us do every morning. And inside the shower, I always have ideas because there's very little else to do in there apart from wash. And ideas always flow. And so therefore I'm immediately pitching ideas to myself to sort of sense check them and see, am I completely mad or does this idea have some sort of legs?
Okay. Did you say a neurotic?
The neurotic spaceship, I think he called it.
Just checking. Okay.
Maybe it's moronic spaceship, I don't know.
The reason I'm asking, I just seen in the news there that, do they have a Dragon's Den in the States?
Yes, they call it something different. Shark Tank.
All right, okay. I just see somebody's in trouble because they were accused of selling something that they shouldn't have been selling, but they were on Dragon's Den, and she's now come out and said, well, I didn't ask to go on Dragon's Den. They approached me and asked me to come on and pitch my ideas.
It's completely unlike the media to tell any lies or do anything shady.
Yeah. Do you welcome the members coming to you with an idea?
Yeah, all the time. Because I think there's this sort of concept that I'm kind of always right and that there can't be anything better or new that I wouldn't have already thought of, and that's just not the case. And it happened on a smaller scale, if you want to call it that, but somebody the other day had one of the reports that we have inside the report suite, and they just happened to ask, because the data was already there, could there be another chart for something that we hadn't thought of? And it was literally click, click, done for that person. And it was certainly something that they found could be useful for them. And then we just made it available to absolutely everybody. We just made it part of the process, part of the report going forward. But we hadn't thought of it. And I wouldn't say that it was integral to doing the business, but it was certainly useful.
An improvement.
Yeah. It added on another piece for people to look at. So I always kind of welcome that. Like the more brains you put together, within reason, whenever you get that term of brainstorming, which I think's actually been banned. That word has been cancelled. But you put a number of people around in a room and you start thinking of things, do a bit of brainstorming, you generally come up with some good ideas. Now, you can take that a little bit too far in that you can put too many people in a room, have too much brainstorming, and then you end up with the government. And absolutely zero productivity or zero good ideas.
Well, if you weren't feeling neurotic, you will be now. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because you could, no matter what it is you look at implementing, you look at it, but if you put it out to a lot of other people, somebody will always come back with something that you haven't thought of.
Yeah, and I guess then it can also lead in to something that I've seen regularly, which is people trying to cherry pick something or cherry pick a process, and that just doesn't work. Because then what you've got is you're basically everything to everybody, and therefore you're actually nothing to nobody, which is, it's a double negative, but it's very, very true. Whereas if you've got something, you've got a service, you've got an offer that makes sense on so many levels, whenever somebody comes in to try and pick it apart, could I do that little piece of that? The tendency for a lot of people is to go out and then try and create that, but actually the right way of doing it is to say no. No becomes very, very powerful, because if you get used to saying no whenever you need to say no, then the yeses actually become really integral, really important.
And when somebody pitches an idea to you, for instance, do you look at it straight away with numbers? Because I know that's your go-to a lot of the time is, okay, what's the numbers behind this? Is it going to work? Is it going to be profitable? Is it going to cost a lot of money? What?
Yeah, numbers and logic really is the two tests that I would perform on it. And numbers don't necessarily always have to be immediate, because there is also that element of time, and you see that throughout all kind of businesses, or all good businesses. Whenever you're producing, let's say, the very first unit of something, could be something like an iPhone or a MacBook or something like that. Well, there's no way that they can produce that MacBook for the price that they actually sell it at, the very, very first one. But the 1 millionth one will be at a fraction of that price. So the numbers start to work over a period of time. And the same thing can go for services. If you've got to, actually a very good one, which we go to regularly, which is Belfast Giants, the hockey team in Belfast here in Northern Ireland. They had to build a stadium. They had to build an arena. And they had to put in a fairly expensive fridge freezer into the bottom of the arena to create the ice. That cost millions, tens of millions to produce. And on the very first day, the very first game, well, that was a pretty hefty loss if you just look at it in isolation. But now that stadium is 24 years old. It's been host to thousands of hockey games. It's been host to certainly hundreds, if not a few thousand gigs or comedians or some sort of event. So the longer that that's standing, every single event that it puts on becomes more and more and more cost effective. So yeah, if you're looking at an idea, you're looking at a business, I think numbers, and then is it logical, and then looking at some form of timeline, that's where I would, I guess, start, middle and finish.
That's the golden rule, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, it's giving it that longevity, isn't it? The picture where it's going to be down the line. How it's going to look maybe in 6 months, how it's going to look in a year, forecasting that out. And
yeah, because at the end of the day, if you've got a business idea, it's got to be something that's going to have longevity. I mean, there's not too many businesses that last 3 months or 6 months or 12 months, unless they're failing. We haven't done enough homework, but there's very few businesses that would start up, be successful inside that period of time, and then shut down. So there has to be a level of timeline, longevity, and the longer that it can keep going for, then you start to get those economies of scale, those cost effectivenesses, and everything in between.
Sort of the seasonal product argument, isn't it? Don't sell seasonal products.
Yeah, sell something that is going to be the same sales in May as it is in November, as it is in January. It just continually happens, so that you've got, again, that's kind of where you would bring in the logic. Rather than having the peaks and troughs, you've got something which is very, very stable. But of course, some people will go the other way. They'll want those peaks. They don't particularly want the troughs, but they're interested in the peaks. It doesn't sort of work like that. It's like if you want the highs, you're going to have to deal with the lows. That applies in business as well.
Absolutely. It's private label. It's obviously something you've been doing for a long, long time. Do you ever see yourself venturing into other types of business?
I mean, I've done a number of different businesses. I mean, I even have, at this minute in time, I do a little bit of rental, on homes, houses, short-term, long-term lets. But is it a business per se? I guess for me, it's not. It's more of an investment. But there's always that thing of when you've got something quite passive, that the desire kind of comes in to take on something else. But the way I kind of look at it is all businesses are very, very similar. And I know a lot of people disagree with me on that, and that's cool. But they have they have intrinsic pieces to them which are identical, regardless of whether you're selling males jackets, all right, or fashion per se, or if you're in electronics, or if you're in the restaurant business. They all have fundamental elements which are exactly the same. So I guess it's more a love of business as opposed to a love of a business. But of course, your first love is always your first love in every walk of life. So, and that applies to business too. My first love was private label, doing my own products. It's got a big realm, a big circle, because there's so many different pieces to the puzzle in it, and you can go as far down that rabbit hole as you desire or want to do. And I've explored a hell of a lot of the circle of private label, but every day's a school day, and you can learn a little bit more every single day. Even having done it now, 27 years, it still throws up things that are a learning curve.
Yeah, it's a bit like everybody's first love. You could do something 27 years ago and they still throw it up at you. But
sounds like you're speaking from experience.
Well, my first love was a psychopath, but we'll not go there.
All right. Hopefully that was the film with Norman Bates in it. But here,
absolutely, yeah. Actually, one last thing, just you were talking about your rentals there, so that's something that you can step away from. You can take a look at every now and again, just keep an oversight on it. Is that something with private label people that you think, because of the amount of work that you guys are doing, somebody out there can come into the business, say, right, what have the guys done in the office today, which would be us, just have a quick look, say, okay, what do they need me to do, dive back out of it and come back in?
Yeah, and I think if you put it in the same context, you got to know what you want before you go in. And also what you don't want. So whenever I was looking into the rental thing, the last thing that I wanted to be doing was the everyday or the day-to-day micromanaging of absolutely everything. I don't want to be going down changing light bulbs. I don't want a customer saying to me that, there's only 3 forks instead of 4, right? Things like that. I made sure I didn't want to do that. Now I have to pay for that, right? I'm either planning or paying, right? And in this case, I was paying. And getting a management company in to do all those things, that comes at a cost. But that's exactly what I wanted. So that then at the end of the month, they would report to me. Here's what's happened. Here's the numbers. Here's this, that, and the other. I can then review that, look at it, make some suggestions. And also, you can do a little bit of the odds and sods, I would call it, and as you said, going down, checking on the bigger things that a management company won't do. The same could be said inside any business, and the same could certainly be said inside private label, if that's what you want to do going in. So what you really want is you want to set up the business, you want to employ a management company who's going to run it for you, and you're going to pay them to do that work, and then you're going to invest in the stock. Right, so in the rental game, the stock that you're investing in is properties. In the private label game, the stock that you're investing in is product inventory or actual items. So yeah, it's totally possible. If you don't want to be day to day, even week to week, you just want to make an investment, so to speak, and get a return, but still own the business.
Makes perfect sense, I think. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Robert. Speak to you again soon.
Pleasure.
Get involved, have your say, ask us a question, or leave us a voice message by heading on over to privatelabelpeople.com/podcast.
Thanks to Robert for coming and chatting to us. If there was ever a man to listen to on the subject of pitching, or indeed to pitch an idea to, it's him. That's all we have time for this episode, but as always, thanks for joining us, and please feel free to leave us any of your comments, questions or ideas. Until next time.